welcome to the Kamla Show. We bring you interviews and conversations with entrepreneurs, technologists, filmmakers, and newsmakers from in and around the Bay Area. But today, my guest has come all the way from Yuba City, which is about 140 kilometers, give or take 5 kilometers, from Mountain View. And her name is Leela Rai. She belongs to a small community of Punjabis who have been living in Yuba City for over 100 years. Welcome to the show, Leela.
Thank you, Kamla. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. So, this community in Yuba City. Yuba City is actually the county seat for Sutter County.
Yes.
And Sutter County was actually created when the Mexican government gave a little bit of land. And of course, John Sutter discovered gold there in 1840s, and rest is history. But right across the river, River Feather, history of another kind was created towards the end of 19th and early 20th century. This is when the first Indians from India started to come, and they came predominantly from Punjab. And both your grandfather and father were Punjabis.
Yes.
And they both married Mexicans.
Well, my mother is half Punjabi and half Mexican, and my father, yes, he married my mother. My maternal grandfather was from India, and he's the one that married the full Mexican, but she's also got a lot of Spaniard in her.
Spanish blood. Mm. So we have a picture of your grandmother. Her name was Ernestina Zuniga.
Right.
And your grandfather's name was?
Bishan Gill Singh.
Bishan Gill Singh.
Gill
So
Singh.
in this picture, your grandfather is a little bit light. His color is far lighter, I would
Yes,
assume.
he was a darker man than the picture, but the photo studio lightened him up because we made copies of that.
Okay. So tell us the story of your grandfather. He came to Arizona in the early 1900s?
Actually, he came through Angel Island in 1909, and he came to work in the railroad
in California?
In California, and made his way to Arizona because there was lots of opportunity for cheap land, and he bought land and he leased land, and it was far more affordable in those days. And he married my grandmother in Arizona, and they had 5 children. In those days, they weren't able to own land. The Asiatics weren't able to own land, so they would put the land that they owned in other people's names. And so my aunt was the firstborn. Her name was Basant Kaur, but then when she went to school, one of her teachers called her Betty, and that stayed, and my mother. And so they would put the land in their names, and
because they were Americans?
Because they were Americans, and then other Punjabi men also put the land in their names.
So was it common that even the land would be put in the daughter's name? I had read that the land would be put in the boy's name.
Well, the boys weren't born yet. So in this instance, it was the girls.
So regardless of the sex, the child became the owner.
It was the need to have an owner.
Okay. So your grandfather in the early 1910s, when he worked here in California, do you know when he went to Arizona, and where in Arizona did he go?
You know, I'm not exactly sure of the exact date, but my mother was born in Tolleson, Arizona, so that's just
which is
south,
Tucson?
Just south of Phoenix area.
Okay.
And then my aunt was born in Prescott, so you know it's all around that same area. But I'm imagining that they moved, you know.
And we have a picture of here, and this is
a picture of my family at my aunt Betty, who's in the center.
Okay.
Her birthday party, and surrounding her is my father.
Okay.
To the
left.
Okay. And then behind them is my
That's
grandmother, my mother, my aunt Isabel, who's 3 or 4 years younger than my mother.
And then that's your brother.
And my brother,
David,
with the mustache.
So
and then my cousin was right there.
So the lady here, that's your grandmother, your Mexican grandmother.
Yes.
Okay, and her name was?
Ernestine Singh.
Ernestine Zuniga Singh.
Ernestine Zuniga Singh.
Okay. And so she married your grandfather very early.
Very young.
Okay. And we can put the picture down now. And when did they move here? Did they ever move to Yuba City?
After they lived in Arizona, there was a big drought, a long drought. And so the crops weren't growing, so they moved to Imperial Valley.
Which is the southern
which
part
is
of
in
California.
the southern part of California, close to the Mexican border. It was very hot, and so they grew...
And it's east of San Diego.
It is east of San Diego. And they grew vegetables. And they lived there for a number of years, but then my aunt Betty moved to Berkeley. It was around World War II. And
oh, so the Depression impacted them very badly.
Yes.
The 30s. That's why they moved to Imperial Valley.
Yes.
Okay.
And so then my aunt was, you know, of age, so she wanted to move to Berkeley. And then my mother followed my aunt to Berkeley. And they would go, it was an easy drive to Yuba City.
How was it easy? I mean, I've driven to Yuba City, and it can take a long time if you get stuck on the freeway.
But there were only certain towns in California that had a pocket of Indians, Punjabis. And so that was one of them. And Berkeley didn't really have, at that time, a lot of people that they were familiar with. Because there were people that went from Arizona to Yuba City. One of them was Nancy Singh. She was also from Arizona. And Janie Punyan, she was also from Arizona, and they moved to that area. So they had a little network of people that they knew.
So what is, why is Yuba City so popular in the Punjabi mindset?
I think that the climate was very similar to the Punjab, and Punjab means 5 rivers. Well, there were three rivers in Yuba City.
Which are?
The Feather River, the Yuba River, and the Bear River. And so, you know, there's always that comfort, area of comfort as far as agriculture and being able to farm in an area that there's that comfort zone, and then creating a little culture around that and a little social environment. So that attracted people.
So by the time your mother and aunt came to Berkeley in the 1940s, Yuba City had already become kind of this popular Punjabi place in their minds. So they knew that's where you go to hang out with your people. Socialize and find a man.
My mother was in the market.
She was in the market.
She was in the market, and she met my father.
And this is a picture of your mother and father.
Yes.
So that's your father.
This is probably in the late 1960s.
Okay. And right above the picture there is that Guru Gobind Singh.
Yes.
Who was one of the gurus. So that's a picture of your mother and father. So how did your mother meet your father?
They met in Yuba City, probably in a social situation.
Was your father a very social person?
He was. He enjoyed people, and he was a very likable person, and people gravitated to him. He was just kind.
So they met at a social?
Yes.
And then how did your mother decide? So what is interesting is that there is a conservative strand in the community, and yet there's a very liberal strand. That is, women and men went and found their own partners. And the case of both your mother and aunt, and all your other aunts, they found their own partners, did they not?
They did.
So how long did your parents court?
They didn't tell me that, but I do know that they did go to Reno to get married.
Okay.
And then they were the first ones to settle in Yuba City. And then my
first ones from your mother's
from my
family.
mother's family to settle in Yuba City. My father had been there for, I don't know, 5 years already, and or maybe longer. But my aunts came and lived in Yuba City, and then my other aunt was in Imperial Valley. Then she came and lived in Yuba City, and married in Yuba City. Then my uncle came because my grandparents also came.
To
They
Yuba.
left. They left the Imperial Valley, and then my grandfather bought 2 peach orchards, and so he farmed in that area as well.
So your mother is half Mexican and half Punjabi,
Yes,
and your father is a full-blooded Punjabi.
yes,
And he had a very interesting trek to this country.
he did.
Took him 5 years.
It took him 5 years. He left India with a group of men, probably about 15 or 16. My uncle, which we call my taya, which means uncle, he and my uncle had planned this journey. My grandparents, his parents, were already in Victoria,
Canada.
in Canada, and because it was part of the British provinces or whatever, and so his goal was to make it to Victoria and settle in Victoria, and my uncle's goal was to make it to California because he had his brother-in-law in California.
So even way back in the 1920s and 30s, they had heard about California.
Yeah, the land of opportunity. United States was the land of opportunity,
But why
they
California?
had, because they had no education, and what were they going to do? And what did they know how to do but farming?
So they'd heard about the Homestead Act, that you could go and whatever land you saw was yours? Is
No,
that
I don't
what-
think so. I think they just decided they were young, they were adventurous, and they were going to go and make their fortune because they were hard workers. And my dad had a 3rd grade education.
And
So
your grandfather had?
I'm not sure. My grandfather was part of the military,
The British.
British military. So he was educated in a way that way, but my dad wasn't.
Did
So
he
my-
speak good English, your grandfather?
Good broken English? Yes.
Good broken English. Okay, pidgin English. And just like your father.
Yes.
If you were to compare the two of them, did one speak better than the other?
My grandfather passed away when I was 8, so
Okay.
I can't really judge that.
Okay. So then your parents got married and the rest of your mother's family came to Yuba
Yes.
City, and they were all farmers. And they
Yes.
had bought land, and they had bought land in the children, whoever the child was, the oldest child. And by the time you were born, your father and your uncle were very successful farmers. They had established what was called the Rai brothers,
Correct.
one of the most successful farms, and they probably at that time had hundreds of acres.
Yes.
And your father then went on to become very successful. But you all retained a little bit of the Punjabi influence and values within the community. It has survived 100 years.
Well, I don't think it's been 100 years, but
What I mean is from your grandfather's time.
oh, okay, yes,
You
yes.
know, the fact that,
My brother is a farmer.
farmer, and you all can
We
follow
still-
Punjabi to some extent.
Yes,
And you know about the Guru Granth, which is the Sikh religion.
yes,
But you're also Catholic because your mother was Catholic.
yes.
So you're a good amalgamation of two cultures.
3 cultures, really, because the
American.
American culture, too.
Yeah. But the Punjabi strand seems to dominate. Why is that?
Because because we're influenced by being in Yuba City, and in Yuba City, the Punjabi influence is still there. The migrations, I think there were like 4 major migrations, but right now there's so many more Punjabis than there were in the days that I grew up that you still see the influence. Every evening you see Punjabi maybe grandparents that are walking in the evening to keep up their health, or walking early in the morning.
And they wear traditional
and they
clothes?
wear their traditional garbs, and it's there's far more entrepreneurs that are Punjabi that are going into convenience stores and owning more markets. There's more professionals coming in, doctors that still have turbans and beards, the traditional. There's the Punjabi-American festival that's a huge event in the end of May. And then they have the Sikh parade in November. And you know, the community participates, the community is expecting all this to happen.
But Punjabis are not just the Sikhs, there are also Hindus and Muslims that came.
Yes.
If you look at them 100 years ago, they were all people from different religions that
Right.
came. But most of them happened to be Sikhs, Sardars,
Yes. But
who wore turbans. But they didn't wear turbans. Your father didn't wear a turban.
my father, when he left India, he did wear a turban. He and my Thaya Chanchal wore turbans. My father, along the way, they worked in New Zealand in the swamps to harvest jute, and he got malaria. And so that's when his hair started. He didn't need the turban at some point, and I think he didn't wear it because it was probably hot.
But your grandfather didn't wear a turban.
My grandfather didn't, not that I ever knew, but my grandfather was probably more orthodox than my dad.
In what way?
In that you saw the photo with the Guru Gobind Singh. That was his. You know, that was, he took great pride. He was one of the originators of the Stockton Sikh temple. He was one of the signees, you know, for the bylaws, and he was also one of the signees for the bylaws for the El Centro.
El Centro
temple.
down south in
Yes.
Imperial Valley. Okay, so the Stockton Sikh temple was something that you also went to.
Yes.
A lot. Talk to us about that. Even though it's called the Stockton Temple, there were people from different religions that went there?
Well, I don't know about different religions, but certainly they were welcome, because you went upstairs and you prayed upstairs, and then
On a Sunday?
Whenever there was an event, there you were usually 3-day events, and then downstairs was where you had the langar, where you had the lunch,
The communal
and
kitchen?
anybody could eat there, and the Sikh, and that's part of the religion. That's part of the Sikh religion. So
And where would you stay?
we would drive back to Yuba City. So it was an all.
For 3 days?
No, we only went one day,
1 day.
and I don't remember if we went Saturdays or Sundays.
But you also went to church?
We also went to the Catholic Church.
And that was quite all right. Your father had no issues there with you going to a Catholic church?
No.
No issues at all. So today the population of Yuba City is about 65 or 66,000. When you were growing up in the 60s and 70s, how big was Yuba City?
It was a small community, probably around 10,000.
That's it?
That's it.
So you probably literally knew everybody in the city.
Well, we knew, you know, who was who. You know the people that are the foundations, and you knew a bit of the history and where the lineages are of the families that started it and that sort of thing.
What was the postal address of your father in India?
It was Village Boparai, District Jalandhar, Punjab, India.
Village Boparai, District Jalandhar, Punjab, India.
Yes.
And this is fascinating. You ask any old Punjabi in Yuba City, they are able to recite the postal address. Why is that?
Because that's the way that they communicated back to India when, you know, when writing letters was the only way to do it. And, you know, they had those special blue sheets where you fold them up, and they were pre-stamped and everything, and you knew when you got those letters at the post office that they were from India. You didn't even have to second guess it.
So it was very well networked through your letters. All of Yuba City kept tabs on each other. Did they know what was happening in India and Punjab in their little town?
Oh yeah, you know, everybody was connected to somebody back in Punjab. Yeah.
And have you visited India?
I have twice.
Twice.
Once when I graduated from college, it was part of my graduation present. My mother and I went through Europe for 2.5 months, and then we met my dad in Delhi and spent another 2.5 months there.
And did they know about Yuba City in your town? In your dad's town?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They knew my dad. We sent pictures back to them. When I got to the village, They were still on the same, probably the pictures from 15 years before that time. They were on the little mantle. So they took pride in anyone that went abroad.
But what was it like for you when you went to school? You know, here you are at home, you're eating tortillas, you're eating rotis, you have the Catholic side and you have the Punjabi side, but then you go to an all-American school. What was it like for you?
Well, you know, I did have a few other Indian kids that went to school, and so that was...
Did you call yourself Indians?
Yes, we didn't call ourselves Punjabis. That came later.
Not East Indians?
We did call ourselves East Indians, but you know, to make it short, Indians.
Okay, so there were other Indian kids.
Yeah, that I grew up with, and so that made it easier. But for the most part, when I went, I would always look to see how many brown people were in the room, because that was my comfort zone. Because my father...
And how many were there?
Not that many, you know, maybe one or two.
Did you have Mexican kids?
Yes, a few.
Did you feel closer to the Mexican kids?
No, closer to the Punjabi kids.
Close to the Punjabi kids. So was it a struggle for you to go through school knowing that you have all these different identities and yet the school is very American? You have the American flag, you have to, you know, sing, you know, it's all very different.
It's all very different, and you know, it could be a little culturally confusing, because there was, I remember a time when I was in 3rd grade and we were supposed to write on our little biography, and they all thought I was from India, and I never said otherwise because I was so shy. I was so shy, painfully shy, that I never corrected anybody. And then I remember that I couldn't begin my story and I couldn't finish my story because that wasn't my story. And then finally the teacher had to come up to me, and I just couldn't tell her. And I remember having self-esteem issues because of that, self-confident issues. And really there was no reason. It didn't come from my family. It, you know, it came from not being sure where I fit.
And then it took you years to figure that out, where you fit.
Oh yeah.
But growing up, you also were exposed to Indian culture in very interesting ways, because it was during this time that you started celebrating what your brother calls the Independence Day.
There was always two political, cultural, social factions in Yuba City, kind of like the Democrats and the Republicans, but on a social scale. And so they would celebrate two separate, we called them Independence Day. The correct way is to say the Republic Day, because it was in every January. And they rent the fairgrounds, you know, one of the main buildings of the fairgrounds, and they had entertainment, and they had bangara, and they had people that would come and sing, and it was, for a kid, it was such a fun time because it was a reunion with all your friends, and you ran around, and everybody seemed happy and joyful. And there was a couple that had movies. That
Bollywood movies?
Bollywood movies, but you know, they weren't called that in those days. And they came from Vancouver, and they brought the movie with them every year, because there was no DVD, there was, you know, none of that. It was that they would come, the societies would rent the movie theater, and the movie theater was always the Mexican movie theater.
Why?
I don't know why. I think that's where they negotiated, you know, and the Mexicans worked with them on that.
So you went and saw the movie?
So I went and saw the movie, and it was something we all looked forward to every year.
Do you remember a movie that you saw?
No.
No. You don't remember any of the actors, nothing?
No. I remember when I went to Yuba College, and because I was part of the Indian Students Association, and that was part of the thing we did.
So who do you remember?
I remember Waqt, W-A-Q-T.
Vakt.
Vakt.
Yes, which means time.
Okay.
Okay.
And Shashi Kapoor and Shami Kapoor, I think, and I forgot who else.
No Amitabh Bachchan or anything.
No, not yet. They came a little bit later. Or maybe what Vakt was one of the ones that the society brought.
Okay.
An older one. So I remember one.
So you saw some movies.
Yeah.
And then that's no longer held now? There's no celebration of India Day?
No. Then after that, there was enough Sikhs in Yuba City that they wanted to build a temple. And then the land was donated, and then the culture shifted from social gatherings within a cultural society to social gatherings within the religious society.
And today Yuba City has how many Sikh temples and Hindu temples?
I would say that Sutter County is probably a total of 100,000 people. And then Sikh temples in particularly, there's 5 Sikh temples.
One
Four-
per 10,000.
4 within
No, one per 20,000.
4 within Yuba City and 1 in Live Oak, which is the second largest town in Yuba City.
So 5 Sikh temples, and how many Hindu temples?
1 Hindu temple and 1 mosque.
Okay, that's a South Asian mosque.
That's a Muslim mosque.
Yeah, okay. And most of them from Punjab go there. Okay. And so Yuba City has changed, has undergone a change, as you mentioned in your... Today, if somebody was to go to Yuba City, what would they see? Would they still see people walking with their turbans and their Indian clothes?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Especially if they went to the Sikh temple. You know, there's a lot of men that gather. I think they've been doing that for 50 years, still under the trees. Yeah, that's a place they gather and just sit under the trees and
Reminisce.
and socialize and every temple. It's not just one temple.
So it's become a place for them to sit and talk. And what about food? I think what I remember when I first went to Yuba City 12, 13 years ago was came as a surprise. You saw Punjabi letters, you know, Gurmukhi, the script. You saw Punjabi script in offices, especially in doctors' offices. So I guess Punjabi is something that's
like a second language.
In Yuba City.
Yeah, it's recognized that the population of Punjabis that don't speak English is high.
Oh, population of Punjabis that don't speak English
is high.
But you speak 3 languages.
Not all well, but I...
You speak Punjabi, Mexican.
Spanish.
But they called it Mexican.
Okay, but...
Isn't that what your dad called it?
No, he called it Mexican.
Mexican. And English.
Yes.
And English. Leela, thank you so much for coming today and talking about the Chota Punjab. Do you know what is Chota Punjab?
Small Punjab.
Little Punjab.
Little.
Talking about the Little Punjab, which is located literally 140, is it kilometers or miles?
Miles.
Miles. See, now I'm confused. 140 miles from Mountain View. Thank you so much for joining us.
Kamala. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back again with another interview. Until then, take care. Is it 100 enough?